All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be installing the entire catalog that SPL Parts sells for my 340i for the rear axle suspension upgrades, and I'm super excited to get all of this on the car. This was kind of one of the last missing pieces that would kind of complete my build and set me up for the remainder of the track season. So in this video, I'll show you guys how it all installs. I know there are a lot of parts going on the car, but the process is actually pretty simple, so I'll go ahead and show you guys how it's done. So to start off, we need to get the rear of the car up in the air. All of the control arms we're replacing are going to be on the rear axle, so I'm going to go ahead and follow my forbidden method of jacking up the entire side of the car. That'll get both the front and rear wheels up in the air, and then we can lower the car onto one jack stand in one of the rear corners. I'll have a link to the jack stand adapter I'm using in the video description just in case you need it. Then we'll go ahead and finish jacking up the car using the rear differential. Make sure your jack isn't touching the diff cover so that you don't damage anything, and then place a jack stand on the opposite side. Once you're done, you know you've done it right because your car should look like you just finished a 100-mile-an-hour pull and then you saw a cop in the middle of the highway. So yeah, the higher you get the rear of the car up in the air, the more space you'll have and the easier it'll be to get this done. Then go ahead and remove your lug nuts or your lug bolts to remove your rear wheels. And here you can finally see everything we're going to be removing. So on top, you've got the two upper control arms. Then you've got the tow arm towards the back. And then finally going towards the front at the bottom, you can see the trailing arm. To get some more access, we're going to go ahead and remove the cover on the lower control arm by removing the four 10mm nuts. And then the cover should just pull out of place. The first control arm we're going to remove is the rear tow arm. Because it's on an eccentric nut, I decided to measure the distance from the center of the bolt on the knuckle to the center of the eccentric bolt. Normally you would just measure the length of the control arm and try to set your SPL arms to the same length, but because the eccentric bolt can effectively change the length of the arm, I prefer to measure it on the car instead of measuring it on the bench. I just feel like it'll be more accurate and will minimize the change in tow to keep it as close as it was before. Then once you've measured it, go ahead and remove both bolts. If yours are rusty like mine, it wouldn't hurt to hit it with some PB Blaster or some penetrating oil first. Then use a breaker bar with an 18mm socket to loosen the bolts. The one by the knuckle just goes into a threaded hole of the knuckle, so you can just zip that off. And make sure you hold your breath so you don't breathe in all of the 80,000 miles of dust and debris you just disturbed. Then for the eccentric bolt, you may need a counter hold on the back of the actual shaft. You'll hold it with an E-Torx bit. It should be an E14, but on mine, the surface rust helped keep it in place. Hooray! So I just removed the 18mm nut on the outside and then slid off the eccentric washer. And after that, I was able to push the bolt through the subframe to pull it out the front. Then you should be able to fully remove the tow arm. To prepare the SPL arm for install, we need to set the length. Again, you can match it to the stock control arm if you prefer and how you would typically do for other applications, or you can do what I did and just measure the length of the arm to the center of the eccentric bolt and then set the length that way. Use a 3/16 Allen key to loosen the clamp on each end of the arm, and then you can use a 1-inch box wrench to turn the center of the arm to extend the length. This is a lot easier with the arm mounted onto something because technically you don't want the sphericals to rotate. They should stay in the same position and orientation while only the center of the arm is spinning, so they both extend an equal distance on both ends. So if you're doing it on a bench like me, just take your time and work it until you get to the proper length through the center of the bearing holes. Then go ahead and tighten the clamp down on both sides to lock it in place and prevent the length from changing during install, and cut off the zip ties so the holes will be open for the bolts to fit through. The first thing I recommend for installing the tow arms is to work at the eccentric bolt end. The reason is because the washers have a tendency to fall out, so you really want to locate the bolt and snug them up before installing the bolt at the knuckle end. There's a small protrusion on each side that helps hold the washer in place, so that's why it's just staying there. Then go ahead and slide the control arm into its mounting slot and push the provided bolt through the hole into the subframe. And of course, don't forget to put the washer on the bolt first because you need a washer on both sides. Then tighten the nut on, and again, make sure it's snug. I made the mistake of not tightening it enough, and so I went to install the control arm on the knuckle side. You can use the original hardware to tighten it down, but as you can see, the washer popped out of place while I was messing with it, and it's almost impossible to get it back in its slot with everything attached. I just kind of lengthened the arm a little bit to get more wiggle room to line it up, but the preferred method would be what I said originally. So yeah, just snug it up the first time. It doesn't need to be fully torqued down, but make sure it's tight enough to where the bolt and the washer won't jiggle around loosely. Then tighten the bolt on the knuckle end. Make sure the bolt goes in smoothly and do not use an impact wrench here. If there is any resistance, remove it and try threading it in again. You can push or lift on the knuckle to try to get the alignment right, but it is very easy to cross thread these. So take your time, and once it's screwing in easily by hand, then you can follow it up with a socket wrench or your preferred hand tool. Next, we're going to remove the traction links or trailing arms, depending on what you call them. These remove almost the same as the other control arms, so start with an 18mm box wrench to back off the nut until the bolt starts to spin, then use another 18mm counter hold to remove the bolt from the nut. The nut may not come off easily if you have F80 brake adapters like I do, because the kit rotates the caliper down slightly and that reduces the clearance to the control arm. So if you're like me, what you have to do is push the bolt through a little bit while you're removing the nut until it's completely free. My bolt was still in there pretty tight. The control arm was under some tension, so I went ahead to the other bolt and nut that are holding the control arm onto the subframe. They removed the same way, so again, use an 18mm box wrench and a socket to back it off. Then once I got that bolt free, and finally let the bottom bolt fall out too, and then you can completely remove the control arm. To set the control arm length, put a bolt through one end of the control arm and then loosen the clamps using the same 3/16 Allen wrench, and then turn the center section of the arms to extend its length. Make sure the sphericals don't rotate so that you are extending both sides the exact same distance. You'll know when you reach the right distance because you should be able to fit a bolt through the other end as well without any resistance. I do make a habit of just turning the arm back and forth while both bolts are in place to try to find the limits, and then I lock it in place somewhere in the middle to set it at the perfect length. Then go back and install the arm using the OEM bolt through the subframe mounting location, and use the bolt that came with the kit and the nut that came with the kit down at the knuckle location. I actually did it backwards in this video. I realized that after the fact, so I did end up going back and swapping them. It probably doesn't matter, but I just wanted to follow the diagram in the SPL instructions since that's what they recommend. And if you didn't already, don't forget to go back and tighten the clamp so that the length of the arm doesn't change once you get back on the street. Last up, we have the upper control arms. The first thing we need to remove is this guide that holds on the brake lines and electrical wires. It has two clamps that are secured with plastic tabs, so use a trim tool to pry each tab free, and then the guide should be released. Then you already know the drill by this point. Use an 18mm socket to remove the bolt holding the control arm onto the knuckle. Again, it's under tension, so don't be surprised if the control arm pops up once the bolt is removed. Next, you have another bolt and nut combo holding the control arm onto the subframe. This space is really tight, so it helps to have a ratcheting box wrench to make this part easier. First thing I did was break it free using two wrenches in line with each other. Then I used them side by side as a counterhold to remove the bolt. Once it's free, you can remove the control arm. Just note that one bushing has a beveled edge on one side, but the other bushing is flat on both sides. This is important for fitment, and you can see on the SPL arms, it also has one side of one bushing with a beveled edge. That will be the one that installs into the knuckle, so just make sure you get that lined up properly. So at this point, it's just rinse and repeat. Set the length of the control arm using the one that you removed and reinstall it with the OEM hardware. Then we're going to remove the last upper control arm you have left using the same method to break the nut free, and then fully remove the bolt at the subframe, then remove it from the knuckle. Originally, I tried accessing it from the top, but that had way less space, so I came in from the bottom, and that was a lot easier. Use a box wrench yet again, since there's little to no space to get a bigger tool in there. It does take a bit of patience, but eventually the bolt will come free and you can remove the control arm. And again, same deal. Set the length, tighten it down, and reinstall with the original hardware. The last thing you need to do is torque everything down. And this is important because these are all critical suspension parts and you wouldn't want anything to loosen up while you're driving. That will obviously cause serious problems. The OEM recommendation is to tighten it down with the suspension under load. So jack up the knuckle as high as you can just before the car begins to lift off of your jack stand. Then begin tightening everything down that you can reach. I'll list all the torque specs in the video description, and SPL Parts also lists all the torque specs in their manual. The clamps of the arms should be torqued to 150 inch-pounds, and pretty much all of the arms get torqued to 74 foot-pounds. I know they say spherical bearings don't technically need to be under load when torqued, but we still have some rubber bushings in the system, so this will compensate for that. And just in general, I think it's a good practice, so that's what I did. And boom, take a look at your work now that you have everything installed. This is super exciting. I can't wait to test it out, but all of the arms look great back here. Unfortunately, it's all going to be hidden once we're actually driving, but it's nice to see it all once it's said and done. The last step is to re-secure the guide for the electrical lines and the brake lines. It doesn't fit on the SPL arms like normal because there are these locating tabs on the bottom that get in the way, so I just zip tied them in place. Make sure once it's tightened down that there's adequate clearance to your shocks and springs and sway bars so the clamps won't be rubbing on anything as the suspension compresses. And then I did one more check of all the clamps on the actual arms to make sure they were torqued down and make sure the arms wouldn't change length while I was driving. And then finally reinstall your wheels and drop the car back onto the ground. Now, no matter what you do, the alignment is going to be messed up after this job. And I've driven on a setup like this to get an alignment in the past, but I didn't want to risk it this time. So just to be safe, I called a tow truck through my insurance and got a free tow to my local alignment shop. That's what I recommend. If you have that option on your insurance plan, just call them and get it towed. It's free and we'll make sure you don't have any issues driving a car with a messed up alignment on the road. And yeah, that's how it's done. Pretty straightforward. Like I said, a lot of parts going on at the same time, but if you take your time, you should be good to go. So the car is at the alignment shop now, getting everything dialed in. And once you get your car aligned, you do still want to double check the torque of all of your control arms. SPL Parts recommends checking it after about 100 miles of driving, and then again after 500 miles. Or if you're going to be taking your car to the track like I am, check it after the first couple sessions just to make sure that nothing is getting loose. And if all looks good there, then you should be good to go at that point. So really excited, and as always, we will be actually testing this out. So like I said, we're going to the track this upcoming weekend. I'll take you guys along with me. We'll test it out on the car, and I'll be able to share my thoughts and feedback on how the car actually handles those upgrades and what actually improves. And of course, if there are any pros and cons you should consider before going this route. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, subscribe for more videos like this one. But otherwise, I think that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.